Well, good afternoon, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy Live with Sophie Alcorn, founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, discussing all things H1B lottery and a whole lot more. But before we get started, would like to ask you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. Today's live stream is proudly brought to you by our sponsors, Syndesis, PERM-Ads.com, and Path to Canada, as well as our friends at Mob Squad. So I'm really excited to be joined today by Sophie. As many of you know her, she founded Alcorn Immigration Law in 2015, has been a featured columnist under the Ask Sophie designation on TechCrunch since 2019. And really over the last, I'd say 5-6 months, has appeared on several national news outlets discussing high-skilled immigration and those that possess extraordinary ability, while also promoting her first book, Ask Sophie, the Founder's Guide to Visas and Green Cards. Sophie, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon.
Oh my God, you're welcome, Rob. It's great to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
I know we were just talking, it was almost a year ago that we were on last time talking about the H1B lottery for fiscal year 2024.
Yeah, we were teasing each other to guess how many people would be entered. And I was like, oh, maybe 500,000.
Yeah. And 750,000. We were just a touch short.
Wow.
I did want to just mention a quick disclaimer to everybody. While Sophie is an immigration attorney, for many of you out there know that I am not. I'm a work authorization expert in the staffing and employment-based field. Anything that Sophie and I discuss here today are merely our opinions for your own entertainment purposes. And I think that's very valuable because in the ever-changing landscape of immigration, we say one thing today and it means absolutely nothing tomorrow, right, Soph?
Exactly. We are recording this on January 31st, 2024. It is currently accurate to the best of our knowledge and ability.
Yes, to the best of our knowledge and ability. I know we have some folks that have already joined us already on the live stream. I do want to mention, if you do have any questions or comments, we are going to do a quick Q&A session towards the end of today's stream. And I'll continue to remind folks over the course of today's conversation to post those in the chat. And Sophie and I will do our best to get through those. So Ask Sophie, the Founder's Guide to Visas and Green Cards. I'm imagining this was quite the labor of love.
It was. I wanted to write a book forever, and I spent 5 years kind of dabbling, and then I decided that my 2023 resolution was going to be to have a bestseller, and so within 2023, I wrote it, I published it, it achieved bestseller status. Now I'm about to record the audiobook. So I'm very excited about that. But yeah, it was really exciting. Just labor of love, trying to consolidate everything I talk to people about in consultations, in my TechCrunch column, to put it in one place. And the thing that was super fun about writing it is I threw immigration forms and jargon out the window, and it's actually a choose your own adventure, which I loved as a kid. So I tried to keep it lively for people.
I love it. Yeah, I would imagine not only the amount of research that you put into it, but just having the Ask Sophie on TechCrunch column, kind of gives you a starting point with a lot of content to lean in on.
But it was all new content as well.
Yeah, all new content. And that came out in September, and I know I saw #1 bestseller, and then I looked, it's still holding its own in the immigration space on Amazon, which is really amazing. So on the audio piece, are you going to be doing the narrations, or what?
Yeah, and that's part of why it took me so long. I have this PVC pipe and moving blanket, like hack job of a sound recording studio, but I'm not going to be able to pull it off if I sit in that thing for 12 hours. So I found a recording studio, and we're just going to get it done and get it launched on Audible pretty soon. So, and you can get like AI voices to do it, but I have a podcast. I like talking. I mean, I said
Yeah.
yes to being here with you. And I
Yeah.
think that there's just a certain, well, like we value humanity more for reasons now that we have AI. So I wanted to be able to convey my voice, my feeling, my sentiment around some of the things I've written. So
Yeah, and I think a totally different audience too, right? There are some folks that no matter what, reading digital media or physical media is extremely difficult,
yeah.
especially in 2024 where time is absolutely a currency. So, well, I do want to just briefly mention anyone who is interested in a digital copy of Sophie's book. I mentioned this. Gosh, I offered this up back in September, but I would like to provide out 2 copies of Sophie's book from a digital perspective on Amazon. So if you drop a question in the Q&A or in the comments after the video publishes, I'll be going back and selecting those and putting that out because I believe in the book. I believe in what you do, Sophie, and the voice that you have and the audience that you've grown. As you know, I've told you I've been a fanboy of yours on TechCrunch for many years and continue to be so. So super excited for you. Well, let's talk about what everyone is here to hear us talk about, and we'll be over the next several weeks. We got a nice little news alert yesterday from USCIS, and I know you and I were messaging back and forth late last night, and I did a post in the middle of January, Sophie, on H1B Lottery, what you need to know, and well in advance was kind of thinking March 1st through the 22nd would be the dates that we would see, and USCIS made it official. I got it half right, March 6th through the 22nd.
But the timing of this AMA, we've had this on the calendar for weeks.
Yes,
and
December,
the
right?
new guidance just dropped last night. It's perfect. It's like they were like, well, we want them to have it.
Yeah, thank you, USCIS, for your support and bringing awareness to our cause. No, I think the interesting thing for me is, the 16 days. I think that's an interesting number, starting on a Wednesday and going through a Friday. I think that's the
March
first
6th to March 22nd. It's kind of random, but
it is
great, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not starting at the beginning of March. Fine. 16 days. Okay. We always try to do it like right at the beginning. I think last year we got everything in the first couple of days, and then the system had errors. So there's definitely an advantage to being on the early side. Hopefully the tech will work smoothly this year. But they have a whole week plus, like they're going to have the whole week of business week of like Monday, March 25th to Friday, March 29th to do the random selection, which is probably just like a click of a button or something. And then we'll have a weekend, and then the first H1Bs can be filed April 1st. So maybe we'll have a little more lead time for those H1Bs that are ready to go and ready to be filed on April 1st.
Yeah, my guess would be petitioners probably will begin receiving notifications on that Saturday, the 23rd, with that deadline being, noon on Friday. That may be a little aggressive, but
we don't want to work all weekend and then
no.
But we will. It's fine. Do whatever.
But then it could leak into the following Monday, right? I think that, anywhere in that kind of 72-hour window would be. It's just my guess, right? My spidey sense
companies, like I know beneficiaries are always so anxious, and of course they are, and it makes sense, but companies have to go through a decision-making process when the results come out, because it's like, okay, who's in? Do we still want to sponsor all of them? If yes, proceed. Who didn't get selected? Who's highest priority for backup plan? If yes, proceed. If no, so there's like this whole balancing act of what order people get notified in. Different companies want to do it differently. So sometimes people have to be patient for a few days and see, which can be hard.
And I think this kind of lends into the organizational account notification that came out a few weeks ago, right? Where now you as a legal representative or myself as a petitioning representative have access to the same account and same visibility internally. And hopefully that'll help with some of the, seamless transitioning, right?
It's also going to allow for e-filing. That's like another thing that they're launching imminently. And we can't do it for every single case. Like there might be weirdness if there's like H4 EADs or stuff at the same time, but that's not in every situation. But having just a single point of access where everybody has visibility and we can e-file, it's gonna make it so much easier for companies to work with attorneys and have everything in one place.
And it reduced costs, creates a better efficiency. And I think one of the things when they went to the electronic selection registration period back in March of 2020, my understanding was these capabilities to accept the e-filing because of the new system was put in place were already kind of in the works. And I'm surprised that it's taken them, the amount of time that it has.
I mean, they've been trying to go digital fully for 20 years. So this is fast.
Well, it is. Hopefully it's a step in the right direction starting on April 1st.
Yeah. But to emphasize your point, the amount of paper, time, energy, trees that were saved by making that initial transition staggering. And the fact that maybe we can e-file, I don't know, 80% of our cases for the lottery or something, like just the human time and attention that has needed to go into meticulously printing out paper, inserting checks, binding it properly, the signatures, like really nitpicky paperwork stuff, driving the document safely to the courier, shipping it, blah, blah, blah. This is just going to free up resources so that legal teams can spend that much more time counseling our clients and answering their questions and providing a higher level of service. So that's a really exciting benefit.
Yeah, I've joked, right? It's going to save, employers a lot of paper and a lot of signatures, right? Two copies on every form. And that FedEx Business is probably the organization that's most upset and losing out on a lot of overnight, right? Because there's been so many times where guaranteed delivery overnight next day was a big part of the process and what happens in that transit. So I'm really excited about this change. Personally, this is one that, I've been really excited about. Another one to kind of curb
so many of these
the multiple registrations, right?
Yes.
When we look at that, so I think
that was the last night announcement that we were texting about.
Yeah,
I'm excited about that. I'm calling this the one person, one chance, and people are like, "Huh? What? Why?" And I'm like, "Well, every person gets one chance of being in the lottery," and they're like, "Well, that just sounds dumb and fair and obvious." And I have to explain, well, that's not the way it's been done. So it's actually a dramatic improvement. And they're like, oh, well, it's a good thing. And I'm like, yeah. I don't know how much you want to do that back.
I think to me, the most interesting aspect is that they're utilizing the passport as the unique ID. The passport number is the unique identifier. It's still
or a valid travel document. So I guess if somebody is like a refugee or something, I don't know.
Okay. Would that be like an I-94 or would that be some other type of document?
I mean, maybe somebody had like let's just pretend there's like somebody who got to Canada as a refugee and they don't have a Canadian passport yet, but they're like a Canadian permanent resident, but they're not allowed to rely on their home country passport because it would mess up their humanitarian status. Maybe, and I'm not a Canadian immigration lawyer, maybe Canada would issue them some sort of refugee travel document that might look like a mini passport. It would have a unique identifying number, and then they could use that to get a work visa in the United States. So it's like a super rare situation. But I also think about people with dual citizenship, multiple passports. And it's pretty clear. You got to use one passport number, essentially. And that's the passport that you have to show when you're coming to the US on your approved H1B visa. And I think it makes sense.
Yeah. So by one person, one shot, it really is, no matter how many petitioners submit a registration on that individual's behalf, it'll be the unique identifier that will be selected. And one of the biggest questions that I've had around it, and I've tried to like read into it, and my understanding, and maybe you can help me clarify it, is if a beneficiary selected, do they then have the choice of which petitioning employer they can choose to go work for?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way the incentives will work now is there's no need to game the system by getting multiple offers. As like somebody last year had like over 80 H1B sponsorships for one person, and there were a bunch of people that had like 50 or more, and several that had 10 or more. If you got 5 or more, you would be picked essentially. And then it looked like there were some companies like colluding to sponsor the same group of beneficiaries. So all those incentives are now removed. And I think it's a really good thing for everybody's peace of mind and sanity, because it's just fair and clear. And you don't have to, like, as a beneficiary, go around, get tons of offers, try to get everybody to enter you. It gives more peace of mind, especially I think it matters a lot to like startups and small businesses. Look, I don't want to just like put you in there if you're going to walk away the second the lottery's over. That's really hard for small businesses. So, I mean, yeah, I guess under the new system, you could theoretically be sponsored by more than one organization in the lottery, but that's assuming that all of the 85,000, assuming there's 85,000 total like new H1Bs available in the lottery each year. So, my understanding of this has been that these new beneficiary-centric lottery measures kick in if there is a lottery. So if there's no need for a lottery because only 70,000 people apply for H1Bs, then they would just give them out in order according to if they qualify. But if we're doing more, and there needs to, if there's more beneficiaries, more petitions, and there has to be a lottery, then each person has to put in their passport number. They get one shot, and that has to be the passport that they enter on in the future. So it removes the incentive to have one beneficiary seek multiple offers from different companies and to have multiple H1B submissions. I mean, I guess you could, but at the end of the day, you're still going to have one chance based on your passport number, and then still trying to figure out the details. But theoretically, there's some mechanism where if your passport number is selected, maybe once, but you had 2 petitioners, then you have to select, and like one will be activated essentially.
Yeah, I think that's the piece of it that I'm most interested in, right? When we talk about, offers of employment and inability to identify the appropriate talent, and employers that subsidize their talent acquisition strategies through high skilled immigration. And a lot of it, you mentioned 85,000, a lot of it, that 20,000 component to the advanced degree, where most times those individuals are either in an OPT or OPT STEM situation where they're in full-time employment. So I'm really interested to see what that's going to look like on the back end.
I think the actual rule is going to be published in 2 days on Friday. And right now you can read like the unpublished version, and that has some interesting information. Like they got 1,300 comments in the 60-day window, and over 500 of them were just on the H1B registration. And there were some through mass email campaigns, but it looked like they got about 400 real letters and suggestions. And so
yeah, it's pages of comments. I mean, it's pretty detailed when you look at the comments, and they try to group together some of the similar ones, but that's not surprising. And I think one of the things you said that was really interesting, and one of the things I see in my staffing world, are these high-tech startups that, have capital, and we're kind of coming back to a lot of these high-skilled tech roles are high skilled immigrants that are either on an H1B or looking for H1B. And when we talk about sponsorship in the lottery, their case for kind of backing away from it over the last couple of years has been these extremely low odds, right? And if I'm only looking to register and potentially sponsor 1, 2, 3, 4 individuals, and then other organizations are doing 80, 100, 2,000, right? The odds of selection are reduced. So I think going the individual route and then giving that individual the option if they do have competing offers, to me, kind of makes it very democratic in that sense, right?
Yeah, and it also kind of make, like, we have like 1 million international students in the U.S. at any given time, and if you were like thinking about the students anywhere, it also helps early stage career professionals who maybe can only get one offer have a more fair shot as opposed to more senior people who might be able to, through their network, get multiple offers. So it could help our international student population and small businesses. Yeah, but I think we're waiting for more details, frankly, on the nuts and bolts of this and what the online system will look at, like how we put in the actual like passport or travel document number, how it gets associated with the company through the organizational account. What specifically does it look like to the beneficiary? Well, I guess like it's, if somebody gets selected, theoretically this company would be able to log in and see that this person's passport number was selected. And so probably this year, as we figure this out, it'll be prudent for HR folks to have a conversation with their selected beneficiaries saying, do you intend to go through with this H1B person? Because you get one shot. We see that your passport number was selected. So is it going to be with us, or do you have other companies that you're looking at? Like, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, that's how I would handle it from a TA perspective as well. It's just, hey, look, you're selected. We have full interest in moving forward with full-time employment, whether that's now or on or after October 1st, and make sure I have that commitment before I go down the path of filing. I think that's a great point. Another thing that came out, and this has been one of the biggest kind of points of contention for the electronic registration, has been the registration fee, right? That non-refundable $10 registration fee. And I think that they clarified yesterday that for fiscal year 2025, so the upcoming lottery on March 6th, the fee will remain $10. We can go back to I believe it was last January, the announcement on an increase in fees potentially coming down, not just for the H1B lottery registration, but across multiple other forms within USCIS. But I think that from what I'm understanding, it sounds like it's going to remain at $10 for this year.
This year, USCIS affirmed last night again and multiple times this week in different stakeholder events. It's $10 this year.
So then my assumption, if I'm reading into that, is once the notice for proposed rulemaking does become law, whether that's on or after April 1st, then for next year, already kind of looking ahead, and we haven't even gotten through
really
this year.
$215 a person next year.
Yeah.
Unless there's litigation or a new administration gets through a new rule, but the odds of a new administration getting through a new rule are very small.
Yeah, and I think too, the $10 to $215 is significant, but it still is a fairly low barrier to entry when we look at.
I don't think it's a big deal. You got to pay somebody $50 to $150K on an H1B. So if you're not willing to pay $200 for a chance, then I mean, sorry, I don't know. I don't think it's that awful. Maybe I'm privileged being from Silicon Valley where prices are really high for everything, but it still seems reasonable to me.
I do think it will have an impact on the number of registrations in totality, for sure.
Maybe for a big organization that's doing hundreds, they might want to rethink their investment into this.
And I'd also pair that back to startups that maybe say, okay, hey, I'm willing to do 5, but I'm not going to do 10. Right. In terms of their demand. I think that
maybe, But like the marginal cost to have, like if you're a startup and you've hired 7 amazing people on OPT and you've given them equity in your company, and maybe you have runway from an investor, but at this point the VC market is changing as well. So companies that already have traction because their product is selling, they're the ones more likely to get investment. So they're not as cash strapped and they're not on such a finite runway term anymore. So I think like the opportunity cost of missing a chance to keep a highly talented core team member in the States is like way more painful than the $200. But what it might affect is like random registrations for like, oh yeah, we did some contracting work with that person in that other country and they seem kind of cool. Maybe we can bring them here. Like maybe that will be decreased, but I think that the demand is too inelastic to affect people who are already employed in the States because they're probably super critical.
It's fascinating. I mean, I think, probably could go even up to 500 or 1,000, right? Not to give them any ideas, but I think that they could have gone even higher. Last two things on the lottery. One, you mentioned April 1st as the beginning of the application filings. I mean, I'm just going to make an assumption that they would probably give petitioning employers at least 90 days again, like we've seen historically in the past. So through June 30th, I would guess.
So.
Yeah.
It has been April 1st to June 30th. It's always been 90 days for every subsequent lottery. So knock on wood. I mean, I don't see any reason why they would change that. I think that was. And I do just want to issue a word of caution on the prior point about like the beneficiary centric process, one person, one chance. I'm reading the comment here. USCIS has the authority to invalidate registrations if people, like if you have a German passport and an Italian passport and you want one to register separately, but then they figure out you're the same person, they can like take all of it away. So don't try to game the system. Be honest and ethical. Just pick one passport, use that.
I think that's where we go. You change that then to one by one passport, one person, one shot, right?
It's like as close to blockchain as we're gonna get.
Very cool. All right, so keeping in our tradition, I've got to ask, do you have a number in mind and what you think registrations may look like for 2025?
Well, there's still a huge job shortage in tech. And I hope that more small businesses and early stage companies are willing to give it a shot now that they have more odds of retaining their team member if selected. However, that will increase demand and could drive up the registrations. I think last year, after all the deduplication, there was kind of like a pretty consistent 20% selection rate, sort of on average. Man, I really want there to be less so all my clients get selected.
But increase their odds.
I think with all of the publicity, that can actually drive up demand. So maybe we'll see another 750K this year.
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's going to be less, but I still think it's going to be, I said 325,000 towards the end of the year and kind of my predictions for 2024. But the more I talk about it and get a feel for it, it seems like it's going to be higher than that. A lot of that is based on, I was kind of thinking that they may go ahead and increase the fee as well this year.
I think that would probably decrease next year.
With them not doing that, I think that companies are going to go, my barrier to entry is still relatively low. And if I can, increase my odds by having some really good talent on my team, maybe sponsoring folks that I wasn't considering from a registration perspective. So my guess is it'll probably be somewhere in the middle of the two numbers that we just put out there.
Let's see.
We'll definitely monitor that. Probably end of April, we'll get a confirmation of that. Well, that's awesome. I just wanted to mention, for those of you that are tuned in here on the live stream, I did see one question come in. If you have other questions or comments, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Sophie and I will get to those in probably about 10 minutes or so. Would love to take any thoughts, observations, clarifications, and we'll do our best to answer them accordingly. I know we've kind of hit on the April 1st change that's looming and been something that's been widely covered. The electronic filing, I think, is the biggest thing of that. And I've also seen some language around defining specialty occupation. And I think from an employer perspective, on my side of the table, from an employer perspective, this is one of the biggest things, right? Like, how are we redefining what is and what isn't a specialty occupation, and what's deemed that? Who's determining that? I was just curious if you had any insight on clarifying what that may look like on or after April 1st.
Sure. So in the press release from last night that announced the dates of the lottery and this beneficiary-centric process, they did say, like, we put a lot of H1B stuff forward last fall, like October, when we did the whole big H1B modernization rule. And we warned you then that we might have to, like, piecemeal it out, and we're doing that. So this isn't the only H1B rule. Another one's coming. We touched on a lot of stuff last fall. For now, we're just focusing on the lottery things to get that moving on time and smoothly. But you all can expect that more will be coming. And I think a lot of the comments were on that as well, from a lot of big organizations that took the time to weigh in December, and all sorts of letters and combined letters and things. But there were several topics they touched on. There was some language in there that would help startup founders, but also create this, like, new 1.5-year H1B for early stage companies, which I wrote in to say, like, we don't need that. Like, you already have the ability to make H1B shorter than 3 years if you have any questions. So, like, give founders their peace of mind time runway to create. They also wanted to look at streamlining the cap exempt H1B process and make it easier for research nonprofits to host H1Bs without going through the lottery, and kind of like changing the definition of which organizations can qualify. So research doesn't have to be like a central tenet, but organizations that conduct research as one aspect of their missions might be able to bring in talent. As you said, there's this potential, and this raised a lot of questions for employers, but this shift to more of like a skills-based approach to defining specialty occupation and if people qualify. And a lot of, I think a lot of the comments that I read were sort of in the vein of, like, look, this is a return to, like, Trump era H1B adjudication policies that are overreaching and super challenging to deal with and very detail intensive, and it's a waste of time. So a lot of organizations wrote in against that, and we just still don't know where the government is going to come down on that, or how they're viewing all of the different types of feedback that they received. But that could be in the next rule, but they could omit it. Like, they don't have to promulgate rules on any of these topics. So if they're happy with the H1B lottery, they could theoretically decide to leave it at that and take no further action. But I think there is a drive in this administration to try to clarify and firm up the changes they've been able to practically in this administration, just to keep things settled and calm for American companies in the case of a party change in the White House in fall.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because really the first couple of years it was pretty quiet in the employment-based immigration front,
Yeah,
from a
yeah,
policy
yeah.
perspective. And so now we've seen some pretty, I mean, I'd go as far as to say extensive changes, right? But it
Oh, it's
really
been
is
great.
just kind of modernizing the system more than it is making, cutting edge changes for the sake of making them.
I think the first 2 years they were just dealing with like basic backlogs and trying to get their
Mhm.
processing times down from COVID
Yeah.
and staffing and hiring and
Hmm.
training. And then really since the EB2 NIW and O1A memos of January of 2022, that kind of like marked a turning point. And
Hmm.
they've been really doing, I mean, even in December, there was this amazing thing where USCIS isn't going to penalize students seeking OPT or STEM OPT for having like an I-140 pending or filed. So that's incredible. It means that like student entrepreneurs could self-petition green cards and still get their work permits. And so that's incredible. So there's been a lot of really amazing changes along the way.
Yeah, I get asked about that a lot, right? For if I'm in an OPT EAD, can I be a business owner?
Yeah.
And I have a good friend of mine, Daniel, who has a firm, and they help individuals that are on OPTs land their dream jobs. But it comes up a lot from kind of the
Oh yeah.
entrepreneurial
We help a lot
spirits
of
on that. So it's a really interesting rule to hear about, and I know that's something that that demographic is really interested in. You also mentioned cap exempt, which I think is
yeah.
always something to keep in
Yeah.
mind, right?
Yeah.
When we're looking at failed lottery attempts and what are my options. Cap exempt employers, universities, research institutions, nonprofits, right? They're a great option. There are some restrictions that come with it, no different than a non-exempt type H, but I think that's a good piece of advice, and at least worth looking into. Another thing we've talked about in the past, and I just wanted to mention it briefly because you're just a wealth of knowledge on this, and that's the concurrent H1B, right?
Yeah, yeah, you
I
have
get
2
asked
jobs
about
at 2
that a lot.
organizations on
Hmm.
H1B.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really an interesting piece, and I think from a H1B ownership perspective, I know we've covered this as well, but also worth mentioning is as these things evolve, and that's that 49% ownership,
Oh,
right?
well, let me tell you what I think
Yeah.
about that now, because I've changed in the last year. Because
Okay.
first, the USCIS website changed on H1B, and then the preamble to the H1B modernization rule in October gave
Mm-hmm.
me what I suspected was possible. But they basically said, and this is like legal, whatever, but bottom line is we used to go by the common law definition of employer-employee relationship. So y'all were diluting your equity under 49%, getting these 3-member boards. But hey, we're focusing on the corporate law definition of employer-employee relationship now. We've been doing that for several years in different areas of adjudication, not just founder, beneficiary owner H1Bs. So essentially, we are now able to get H1Bs for business owners for themselves to work in their own companies, even if they own more than 50% of their equity, and even if they don't have any other board members. So there is no need to give up control and ownership of your company anymore to get an H1B over to your company to work there legally on H1B. So I think that's an incredible development for founders.
That is, and that leads me to a couple more questions on that, just because my brain starts spinning. But I'm going, okay, if I have an existing H1B, right, and I'm working as a full-time employer, but I'm in a startup or launching a startup or becoming an owner, that would be a prime situation where I could have a concurrent
Yep.
H1, right? And
Yes. So that's true. Like if you're working at a big tech company and
Mhm.
you're on H1B and you have some way to initially fund your company, you could you'd either get like a 10-hour a week H1B as the owner of your other company to just work there and build it on the side legally. You would have to pay yourself. But you could do it at the same time. But there you want to talk to an IP attorney because you want to be really careful that you actually own the technology that you're creating on the side. And so like maybe if you're doing consulting work for somebody else, it matters less. But if you're trying to have like a venture-backed startup, you might want to quit your day job first, and do a full-on H1B transfer to your new company.
Would that be considered like a self-petition H? I mean, I know it's driven by
No,
no. Okay. Okay.
No, because we're going to loop in somebody else with the right authority, but they don't have to be an owner of the company.
Understood. Very complicated. We don't make it easy, do we?
We make it fun.
Yes,
but only for me, I think. We should spare everybody else from that type of fun.
No doubt. No doubt. We'll just mention again, if you have any other questions or comments, post those in the chat. We'll get to those here in a couple of minutes. I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, outside of these notices for proposed rulemaking, final rules, potential reform or changes that you're hearing about or possibly could be on the horizon as, we kind of move through an election year. Anything you think has a chance to make it before the end of the year?
Well,
how much time do we have?
Stuff that's near and dear to my heart is, okay, great. So USCIS said that students can get their OPT, but will the State Department agree? Can they travel? Can they get new visas? Will CBP let them in? Like, I feel comfortable doing that for people who are just, I'm in America and I'm going to stay here for a while. That's like one area that's rapidly evolving. Another area, like I love international entrepreneur parole, but it's not working. Maybe they can try to fix it by the end of the year. I don't know, but they've had a lot of other priorities, but that would be amazing. If there could be some sort of like last gasp thing based on the AI executive order to try to like recapture unused green card numbers and push forward priority dates a bunch, like that would be like manna from heaven for so many people that would be affected. So those are some of the things that I think about for that. And then I'm just seeing a lot of demand for like Indian professionals who have worked here for 20 years and now their kids are in high school and they have like an EB2 priority date from like 2018. And if they could only get an EB1A, they would be current. So we're helping a lot of people self-petition for extraordinary ability to get that green card faster. So that's really magical when we can qualify somebody for that. There's just a lot of people that are trying to get their I-140s through before November. And then for AI people, we were even last year getting I-485s approved in like 6 months with no interview, which was incredible.
Wow.
I think there's going to be like a push throughout this year to try to get as many people adjudicated as possible.
Which is interesting because did the numbers allow for that, right? And we start to look at, you mentioned priority dates and country of origin and, the whole green card backlog aspect of where we are. But it's been a pretty dire year for, primarily folks from India, right? That are in the backlog. And
and I've even heard some people say like, look, you get that, have a U.S. citizen kid. And when they turn 21, you get your green card, stay on H1B until then. And it's like, that's a lifetime.
It shouldn't be that way, I think, really is what it comes down to for me.
No, but we can't unless we get Congress to change it. It's not happening. So that's
but the green card recapture is absolutely one, and clearing some sort of process for clearing the backlog. And I know we could talk about that forever, but I think that those are two things that have been front of mind now for several years, and as we continue to bring awareness to them.
Hopefully. Oh, and Rob, the other thing that's really cool is this H1B stateside mail-in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, the domestic renewals. Do you think that will continue past the pilot that they've put in place?
The goal is to implement it for H1Bs, L1s and O1s and maybe other types of visas by the end of the year. So I'm just really keeping my fingers crossed that this pilot program is a success and they solidify it for H1Bs. They make it accessible for new H1Bs and then other types of work visas as well. Because that would help so many people.
And that isn't requiring a in-person interview. It's all like a drop box that's being processed through a processing center in DC, I believe, is what I read.
It's some sort of like online application, and then you mail in your passport, and then you wait many, many weeks, and you hope it gets approved. but you don't really have any visibility into the process.
Well, that's exciting that you think it's going to go past the pilot. I'm really hopeful for that. I've talked about it a lot, and I think that's been one of the kind of the common sense pieces of reform, that eliminating the need for travel and a consulate appointment. And as we saw during kind of the height of the pandemic, how difficult getting an appointment was. If the consulate was even open, it was months and months and months, and there was a lot of groups dedicated to it. So great stuff.
Some just really dedicated people trying to get some of these things through to the best of their abilities while they can. So.
And again, it kind of comes back to, we all have our own unique voice and how we bring awareness to it, and try to shed light on the issues at hand that are common sense. And I think that's one of those aspects for sure. So there was a question that came in, and I'll pull it up here. It says, is there anything I can do as an individual to increase my chances of being picked? It's his third year attempt in the lottery, is my guess, third time. OPT STEM, which we know expires after 36 months. Or does it solely depend on his passport number?
Well, the good news is you have just as good of a chance as any other person this year, assuming you only get one job offer and one company to put you in the lottery. So at this point, your playbook is make sure you are working at a company that really loves you and where they're organized, and they will successfully put you into the H1B lottery on time, and have a good relationship with them so they know your commitment levels, so that if and when you are selected, they follow through with the full petition. And there's two more things I would offer in this situation while you have a year left. One is talk to your company now about exploring programs for concurrent CAP exempt H1Bs. So you could go to Open Avenues Foundation and do a Global Talent Fellowship for 5 hours a week. We do a ton of those. The company can sponsor you to work 35 hours a week. No lottery needed. You have to teach US students the whole time, but it's a way to do it. I guess you could also try to, like, as a one-off, get a part-time teaching gig on an H1B at a local university. Maybe you can get a job that way, and then you could have a second part-time job at your company. So that's one route. The other route is there are more and more self-help groups, business masterminds, coaching groups, Discord servers of people becoming qualified for O1A visas for extraordinary ability. Like, I have an online class for this, Alcorn Academy, Extraordinary Ability Prep. Sometimes you need that extra accountability partner to help you. So those groups can be great. I don't have a group right now. But I've seen people become qualified for O1s in like 6 months if they have a clear idea for like what their expertise is in some project that they really care about. And you can do all of that in a way that doesn't involve any employment that might not be authorized. So like, I've seen students on STEM OPT who can only work for one company, volunteering, creating a tech platform that actually helps like tens of thousands of people, but they don't have a company, they don't monetize it. But they're just doing it to help people, but then it gets kind of famous and they're just volunteering and they're not making any money off of it. So if you think creatively about your field and some way that you have to contribute to society and put it together, I think I've seen a lot of motivated people get those qualifications in 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I think you nailed it too with Open Avenues. I had Danielle on last year, and just to see their service and the program that they offer has just continued to grow. The awareness kind of surrounding what they do. I may be wrong in this, but I want to say I saw where they entered into a partnership pretty recently. It might have been Johns Hopkins, but I could be wrong on that.
That's cool.
Yeah, so they, actively partnering with universities, right, to provide these CAP exempt opportunities for concurrent
and if I know you have like a lot of people in big companies who listen to you, I think one of their current offerings is the Build Fellowship. Well, they'll partner with other nonprofits to add this capacity to other organizations. And so if your company had a foundation, they could partner together, or other types of nonprofits that want to give back in a specific field. So there's a lot of different ways to do this if the right stakeholders choose to come together. but there's a lot of good that can be done.
Other options, none of them are easy, and a lot goes into it from a qualification and an evidence perspective. And you mentioned extraordinary ability. It's a term that we don't take lightly, and being able to provide proof of that is really the key, in my experience at least. And advising out folks on, hey, what do you recommend I do? I recommend every option you have available to you, and pursue every one. It's really what it comes down to. So, now I'm gonna put you on the spot because we didn't plan this, but I wanted to see if you had a question or two for me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. How do you think that the landscape for H1B consultancy will change, both on the company side, the client company side, the beneficiary side, as a result of this H1B beneficiary centric thing, and then next year with the new fees?
Yeah. I think we saw in the previous administration a real spotlight that was put on third-party and client works like H1B consultants, where we had historically low approval rates on H1B extensions and amendments, change of employers. We've seen those numbers increase under the current administration, but there's still some scrutiny when it comes to staffing firms and that third-party and client worksite. And it's really difficult, Sophie, because even though I'm the employer of record and I know what the individual's day-to-day responsibilities are, and I do my best to manage, their output, that line is kind of a gray line. And I think it's one of the things where a lot of very large enterprise organizations that have this demand on talent, because they have gaps to fill on their contingency staffing side, and a lot of it is in high tech, where we just don't have enough graduates, quite honestly, to meet the demand to fill the needs on the contingency side. So it's like a cat and mouse game that's constantly going on, really, in the staffing world, where you mentioned tech unemployment, it's less than 3%.
Yeah.
But then when we look at like some of the H1B data that's out there on LCA filings for, quarter over quarter down 40%, what is that saying? Is that saying that employers aren't hiring more H1Bs, or we're just not filing more extensions and amendments? But I think it's kind of this cautiously optimistic is really my answer to your question. And that is, we still have to pursue the means necessary to fill those talent pipelines and, kind of the war on human capital, as I talk about. And that's where the H1B visa comes into play. And one of the biggest things that I've been really talking about more and more over the last year or so is that advanced degree individuals, international students who've come to the US and obtained an advanced degree and are working in full-time employment. Like, what's the pathway for them for future work authorization? How do we go about that? And that's been something where I've heard a lot of different ideas. I don't know if any of them are exactly perfect, but we've got to come up with and be creative in that sense to provide some sort of pathway. And I think when we do, then you'll see a reduction in that demand on that H1B third-party and client worksite.
And my other question to you, because I used to do, I still do a ton of EB2 NIWs for people who want to self-petition their I-140s. And that was primarily attractive to people not subject to the India or China backlogs, but we've seen that category getting more backlogged in recent months. Do you have any idea how much more backlog that category will get in what time frame? It's so hard to predict these things.
Yeah, the hardest part about that is the way the data is published on the I-140 approvals. And that's been one of the key mechanisms. And I know we've talked about, my visa bulletin predictions in the past when I was on your podcast, and we've covered it before. But that's one of the key mechanisms when I look at the data and I kind of look at months in reverse on the amount of I-140 approvals that existed, whether that's India, China, all the ones that are tracked, Philippines, all chargeabilities, right? And we've seen a huge spike if we go back and start to look at 2021, 2022 in the all chargeability category, right? And I think because of that, that's what's increasing kind of that EB2 NIW backlog, if you will, that exists today. And I think the EB2 and IW, you mentioned, EB1A, we've also seen EB1C, the managerial category. The demand for that has exploded over the last few years. And that's because the backlog that exists.
Right.
And so folks are pursuing every avenue possible to get as current as quickly as they can.
People are highly motivated. We should want them in our country.
Yes, we should. Instead of making it as difficult as we do. But hey, again, as you said, it's fun for me, but I also understand that people's lives are at stake, and I don't take that lightly, and I know you don't either. And I think that's one of the things
I always ask people, if I had a magic wand and I could just give you a green card right now, what would it enable you to do in your life, or why and why? And like the answers I get are astounding. Yesterday alone, it was like one guy wishes he could have a business that would solve diabetes, and he knows how to do it. Another guy just had a baby, and he spent the last 6 months, fully dedicated to his EB1A accomplishments. Another person has a teenager with special needs, and they tried going back to their home country, but didn't have the educational system. So they have to give their child a green card by the age of 21. So it's like, these are the stories. Yeah. I know immigration is full of stories all over across the board, but like, and we talk about like emerging technologies, America's place in the world, and these are all really valuable contributions that folks are
making. And the biggest tell too is the amount of international students and the demand on that. We can go back and look at that pipeline over the last few years, and
how has that changed since the pandemic? Because I know that
there's been a decrease for sure.
Yeah, Canada and Australia are getting a bigger market share of international students.
Yeah. And that goes back to why, right? It's because we don't make it easy to have longevity past the degree, the 12 to 36 months, the H1B lottery aspect. And I also think it's just word of mouth. Folks that have come here and mired in the backlog, experienced the trials and tribulations of everything around it, and how, their vocality now is I'm not saying reducing demand significantly, but is absolutely having an impact on it. So, Sophie, I could talk to you for a whole nother hour on this, but I just been so appreciative of you coming on, and I value your insight. You know how I feel about your team and everything that you guys do at Alcorn Immigration Law. So I just wanted to mention really quickly, if folks are looking to get in touch with Sophie, I know your firm generally prefers more on the employer side, but willing to work with those individuals as well.
Yeah, we do business immigration, U.S. visas and green cards for people anywhere in the world to come to the U.S., live here and work here legally. We primarily help companies, which tend to be rapidly scaling technology, AI, biotech, machine learning, fintech companies, but we can obviously help other verticals, as well as individuals who are seeking self-petitioning for EB1A, EB2NIW, O1A. The other legal innovation that I have recently, just real quick, is copying what Hollywood movie stars do, where they have an agent for their O1s. So they're allowed to work in multiple commercials, photo shoots, stage appearances, movie filmings. We've been able to successfully replicate that model multiple times for folks in tech. So if you don't want to just work for one company, if you want to start your own company, get consulting work, do advisory shares for a startup, we can now craft O1s to allow for multiple streams of income, which people really appreciate. So that's an exciting development as well.
That's awesome. And so just to make sure I've got it right, it's alcorn.law is the website. Correct. And if you're interested in contacting Alcorn, hello@alcorn.law, still the right email address. Let me just, I'm going to drop that in the chat just so we have it here marked. The other thing, very active on your LinkedIn, I know. So, Sophie Alcorn on LinkedIn. Of course, you can follow Alcorn Immigration Law on all the accounts, right? Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube as well. You have your own YouTube account where I saw you did a stream last night. So please feel free to let the team know that you heard about them. from here on the H1B Guy channel. And again, ask Sophie, the founder's guide to visas and green cards. If you're watching or listening to this at a later date, please post something in the comments and I will go through, and I would love to give you a digital copy of Sophie's book in advance of the audio version coming out very, very soon.
Thank you.
And then your H1B webinars that you're doing. I know we didn't mention this. I know you did one yesterday with your chief legal officer, Linda, I believe. And you have another one planned. When is the next one planned?
We have like a whole series of H1B webinars coming up. I will give you the link right now, and you're welcome to put that
Perfect.
here.
Yes.
But our events page is where you can see our whole series, including February 9th, when to sponsor your foreign national in 2024, H1Bs and more. February 21st, how to get an O1A or upgrade to EB1A in 2024. Feb 29th, last chance for H1Bs. If you want an H1B and you have a company, hire us before February 20th because our prices are going to go up. But we've got webinars planned out through April on a variety of topics. So those are free, and you just register on Zoom, and we would love to have you there.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, here's where I always say you are my go-to recommendation when anyone asks me about legal representation. I'm not compensated or incentivized to say that. I merely do that because I know you, I trust you, and I know the kind of quality work that you and your team do. So I just cannot thank you enough again for the time you spent here on the channel and fielding the questions, and really looking forward to what happens over the next year, and we'll continue to make this an annual thing. I hope you will come back on.
Thank you. I would love to. Yeah, let's see what happens, and can't wait to talk to you next time. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I just want to remind everyone, today's live stream was brought to you by our partners at Syndesis, PERM-ads.com, and Mob Squad. We can't thank them for their sponsorship and their support of the H1B Guy platform here on YouTube. If you're watching or listening to this, at a later date, please like it, comment, click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we post new content here to this channel. Go follow Sophie on all the socials and Alcorn Immigration Law. And if you have any questions, please feel free to direct them to her and her team and let them know that you heard about them from here. Otherwise, Sophie, gonna wish you a great rest of your January. As we said, 31st. Today's the last day of the month.
1 more day, 12 more hours.
Yeah, we got some work to do to close out strong. But I know this is the really busy season for you and your team, so I wish you guys Godspeed and the best of luck and a productive and fruitful H1B lottery season. And of course, follow me on all the socials: Twitter, the H1B Guy, Instagram, LinkedIn at Robert Bouchard, and of course the H1BGuy.com and here on the H1B Guy channel on YouTube. I'm Robert. I'm the